I'll jump ahead. I'll say we're in August. We're taping this at the very end of July because I want August to be here. That means camp opens up around the country. Hell, San Diego State and some other Mountain West Conference programs like San Jose State are already practicing as we tape this. But UNLV, middle of the week, will be opening up camp. Caleb Herring is here. It's Cofield, UNLV All Access podcast. Much to get into. Before we get into the nitty gritty, a little more defense talk today with the cornerbacks because we have a conversation with Akeem Davis, who is new to the staff. Well, most of the staff is new, only a couple of holdovers, but Akeem's a really interesting story, not far from actively playing in the game. We got to talk about what happened, Caleb, middle of the week on starting with Colorado saying, we're not waiting anymore. George Kliavkoff and the other presidents have been talking about this new TV deal. Big 12 has been sniffing around a bunch of schools. And, just like that, Colorado, this isn't even hey, we'll be around for a couple of years. We are leaving next year. We're going to the Big 12. And now all of a sudden, Pac-12 has 9 teams. And in some form or fashion, the Pac-12 at 9 and the Big 12 looking to even up its number or expand even further means something is going to change in the future for UNLV athletics.
It has to. Whether it's the Mountain West merging with the Pac-9, I guess we'll call it, something has to give. It could be UNLV leaving. It could be somebody else from the Mountain West leaving into one of these conferences trying to catch on and making its own kind of West Coast super conference. But it was a waiting game, and we all knew it was coming. We felt it coming. I know my eggs were in the Oregon basket as them being the next Pac-12 team to leave. But Colorado, and I think a lot of it has to do with Deion Sanders being the head coach there. I think that energy, that push for more great things from Colorado probably prompted them to not wait anymore. And the silence from the Pac-12 throughout this whole process in terms of what the TV deal is going to be. Is there going to be conference realignment? What are you trying to do to add teams? What teams are you trying to add? There was absolute silence in that regard from the Pac-12, which left a lot of these presidents thinking about themselves first and the best interest for their program going forward. And I'll tell you what, the TV deal isn't getting any better as these teams keep exiting. So the teams that do remain are getting even a worse end of the deal. So it won't be long before the Pac-12 has to do something. I think right after Colorado made the announcement, they had an emergency meeting. It was like, hey, let's figure something out. Who knows what the results of that will be? Who knows if the Mountain West and the Pac-12, keep calling the Pac-12, it doesn't make sense to say that anymore. But we'll see if that ends in the Mountain West or some other conference merging with the Pac-10 to try to make it back to its former glory. Because right now it's suffering. And I think college football is suffering because of it. I don't know if the Pac-12, I don't know what to call it. We'll just keep saying Pac-12. The Pac-12 will survive because for me and a lot of old heads, I guess, around college football, the Pac-12 is a historic Power 5 conference, and it has to be good. It has to be strong, or at least the universities that are involved with the conference have to be strong. So you look forward to seeing something where a merger happens with the Mountain West. It seems more and more likely the more teams exit, Colorado being the last domino. I think there's going to be more to fall. If nothing productive came from that emergency meeting, I think more dominoes will fall, which leaves UNLV in a precarious situation. Are we looking to join the Pac-10? Are we waiting to see if there's going to be a merger? How aggressive can you be if you're UNLV with this conference realignment, with all the chaos that's going on the West Coast?
Yeah, there's 2 people who control a lot of this. Well, at the behest of the presidents, it's the commissioners of the biggest conferences in the Pacific time zone / Mountain time zone, and that is Gloria Nevarez for the Mountain West and George Kliavkoff, who we don't really know a whole lot about, but to this point, I don't know, what does he get, a D grade? They have to stop being passive and start being aggressive. And normally, since we both know college athletics pretty well, this can be a long game play, but now you're getting short game plays. So they've got to react to this. And when I say, hey, throw out some invites here, like literally in the next 3 weeks, this can't be hey, let's see. They've got to jump to action. But, I mentioned it's at the behest of the presidents. And I really don't know right now who the powers are in the Pac-12 sort of instructing Kliavkoff. Is it Washington and Oregon? Is it the more academic-minded schools in Cal and Stanford? I don't want to put the blame at their feet, but I have a feeling there's a push and pull. Washington's a good academic institution. It's not Cal, it's not Stanford. But I wonder who's winning that battle, if they even care to keep the conference together. So I don't know about the dynamics there, but if the Pac-12 does need to get out some invites, and if they're going to bounce back here, they have to invite SMU. they have to invite San Diego State, and then they've got to look for at least one other school or maybe three other schools. So I think they should be hyper aggressive. Frankly, if I were the Big 12, I would F with the Pac 12 and be like, you know what, we're going after SMU. Like even start and also start sniffing around San Diego State.
I mean, why not?
Launch into action. Do something. Come on.
And it's almost like San Diego State tried to help them. As much as that was a debacle for them announcing that they intended to leave the Mountain West, they almost were like begging the Pac-12 to say something, like do something. You need to, and it's almost like they left San Diego State on the win for no reason. Because now look at them, like they need another team. They need multiple teams, 3 or 4 teams, to make sure that they can survive this. And San Diego State would have been a prime target. Now they're back in the Mountain West, and that's kind of resolved itself. But looking back now, hindsight, and maybe we thought San Diego State was outlandish for that, but I think maybe they were. But also with that, the Pac-12 was kind of dumb and for not like jumping on that. Like that was an easy target to say, hey, they're leaving. They're a West Coast team. That's a San Diego market that we're interested in at least. Let's grab it. We're losing, SC and UCLA. Let's get some of that Southern California market. Maybe not lock it up indefinitely, but why not jump on San Diego State when they were a free agent essentially when it comes to the teams in conference realignment? That I think the Pac-12's got to do something. They've got to be more aggressive, like you said, than they have been. And they've pretty much been sitting on their hands while everything's been happening around them so fast.
And not to get people too fired about UNLV, because I think they're in discussions, not UNLV with these conferences, but they're in the conference discussions by those conferences, the Pac-12 and the Big 12. I still believe if you start looking at a pecking order, they're like 5th or 6th on the list for both conferences, which is, you shouldn't be glass overflowing on this one. Now, if you do want to be glass overflowing, I think worst case scenario is actually pretty decent with the Mountain West Conference. And that could be the Pac-12 just imploding, right? Big 12 invites who they want to invite. Maybe they take a couple of Mountain West Conference teams, and maybe it's UNLV. But whoever's left behind, I think has a chance, because I do believe Arizona, Colorado, check that, Colorado with Arizona, Arizona State, and maybe Utah could be going to the Big 12. Whatever's left over, it could be a nicely beefed up Mountain West Conference with Washington State and Oregon State, and we'll see who else. I was looking at JJ Buck does radio down in Albuquerque, and he did a basically a merger of the remaining Pac-12 schools and the Mountain West, and I just don't see this happening. I don't see Cal and Stanford pairing up with a lot of these Mountain West schools. I also find it hard to believe like Hawaii would be in a conference like that when their football budget, I mean, they're playing in a 15,000 seat stadium, and I like Hawaii, root for Hawaii, but that seems like a long shot. So I think worst case scenario, the Mountain West can benefit from this, even if there are some schools pulled from the conference.
And I think that was kind of the goal of conference realignment when it first started in the first place. I know a lot of people looked at it as latching on to one of these Power 5 conferences, or like I guess the 2 mega conferences was the original dream that people were talking about. But I think what the overall thing was to make the game more even, I guess, and entertainment value from one standpoint, and marketability of college football. Like you giving these little guy schools an opportunity, maybe not to go play Alabama every year, maybe not to be aligned with the SEC every year, but adding an Oregon State to routinely to UNLV's schedule gives UNLV a better chance at being recognized, being noticed. It makes games throughout the season more and more entertaining, because now every game essentially is a conference game, with these conferences getting bigger and bigger. And then teams that maybe wouldn't have played each other historically because of the structure of college football for the longest that it's been this way, would get a chance to see each other. And those markets would get introduced to each other. And of course, smaller schools would now be maybe not big schools, maybe not Power 5 schools, but a different kind of conference that's more entertaining than the way it was before. And there's more depth and more power to the conference, if you will. When you add a couple of teams from the imploded Power 5 conference, it just beefs up the Mountain West. Whatever you want to call it after that is up to you. But those teams like Cal and Stanford, for other reasons, I think would have a tough time, I guess, lowering their academic standards to be around, the lesser schools, because that is a factor in this, right? There's a lot that goes into it.
The other option, Caleb, for Cal and Stanford is you go independent for the time being and just cross your fingers that you're going to go to the Big Ten. I don't know what the hell Cal does if they're not getting $35-40 million a year from a conference. So there's so much up in the air, in limbo. I mean, ultimately, what I'd love to see, and I think it would be cool for UNLV fans, because I don't think the Big 12 invite is coming. I think they're going to be maxed out here pretty soon. And if Arizona State, and Utah are options, they're going to have to take those schools. And plus, they need a second Power Five to go renegotiate their deal with ESPN. But it would be tremendous if the Pac-12 and the Mountain West did some sort of merger. Now, with that, I think there'd be some Mountain West schools that would be left on the cutting room floor. But to me, the Pac-12 needs to be aggressive. The signs are there. There's going to be 14 and 16. There already are team conferences. So you need to go out and add. I mean, it sounds crazy based on how arrogant and the slow play here the Pac-12 has executed, but I think they need to go to 14 or 16 now. And then when eventually Washington, Oregon, maybe Cal and Stanford leave, then you at least have the base of a good Mountain time zone and Pacific time zone conference. And by the way, it's not all football. I know a lot of it is football, but they have to be aggressive. Otherwise, the thing's going to dissolve. And here's the thing on the front end, if you go to 14 or 16, and you're adding the likes of whoever it is, San Diego State, UNLV, Colorado State. Funny thing is, Boise's not mentioned, and I haven't seen Boise mentioned in any of this, and yet Boise has a special deal. They've got a special deal with the Mountain West Conference as if there's some, exclusive king, and then people are looking from the outside and they're like, we don't want them. That's amazing. But the biggest thing is, and you're on our show all the time locally on Cofield and Company. The Pacific time zone and the Mountain West time zone is still marginalized from a coverage standpoint, and this is going to make it worse. I mean, look at the cities that could be scrambling to figure out where the hell their school is going to be at a major conference. We're talking San Diego, Vegas. You start going up north to the Pacific Northwest, Seattle, Portland, the San Fran area. Then a lot of these California cities are massive areas that people outside of the region have no idea. Fresno and obviously the Bay Area with San Jose State. That is a big area. There's so many good markets, and this is all going to be left as some freaking group of 5 area.
It's insane when you think about it. Like the from the marketing, the TV standpoint, the deals, just the tickets at the gate, the population of those places. It's insane to think that somebody would pass up on that market. Or it's insane to think that the Pac-12 would allow that to slip. They had a stronghold on some of the most populated areas. Essentially, you have 2 schools in Northern California with the Pac-12 and 2 in Southern California that were like staples in college football at one point. And you let them slip. Well, at least the 2 biggest ones, UCLA and SC, slip. And now Southern California essentially is up for grabs. I know San Diego State is still there, and the Mountain West kind of still has a hold on it. We know they had a turbulent offseason, but those are major markets. And it's insane to think that they're just not going to be capitalized on. Whoever's negotiating those, either the Pac-12, the Mountain West, or whatever conference comes out of the scuffle with this, is going to have a major market on their hands if they can capitalize on it or not with the right media outlets. I know UNLV is a program on the rise, and Las Vegas sports is absolutely on a rise. I mean, we have 2 champions. So Las Vegas market, if UNLV can perform, anywhere near what they expect to as a bowl game competitive team, as a team that draws a big audience at Allegiant Stadium, if they can do that consistently this year, and I mean that it's not crazy to ask of the university to do this, but if they do it this year with how fast things are moving, if they can show we can be a 7-win team, we can represent well in a bowl game, we can sell out a couple of home games even and get big audience for our games, that's a big time calling card for the Pac-12 to say, hey, we can tap into that market, or even for the Mountain West to say, you know what, we're going to try to secure the Las Vegas market and be more aggressive in taking care of that as home base. UNLV has some bargaining chips if they can pull that off as fast as things are happening. If they can have a good season this year, the Las Vegas market is, I think, on brand, maybe not quite to the LA market from a sheer size aspect, but from sports eyes focusing, from maybe outside looking in TV deals, Las Vegas is a great place right now for any budding sports program to take off in.
Camp opens up. UNLV camp opens up this week. As a former player, what are you thinking? Think back to your playing days. What is it like this last week or so? Because in about 3 or 4 days, it's going to get super intense. It is hot as Hades out there. So that's going to be a test early on. And I would assume these practices, I'm not saying the pace of the practice, but what has to be accomplished over about 30 days, I mean, is rapid fire.
Oh, it is. And the late start, like you mentioned at the top, that there's a couple of teams that are already started in camp. there's some benefits to that, but the late start I think rolls you right into season, so you're hitting the ground running when season does start. But these days leading up to it, you're a little bit nervous. It's exciting for sure, but it's a little bit nerve wracking because the team's going to be so new. I know for sure with the new coaching staff, and there's so many players that were added over the fall, or excuse me, over the summer, that are going to be just stepping on to the field for the first time in full pads and with the team activities and fall camp. It's going to be exciting. So all the work that you've done up until this point, from winter conditioning to spring ball to summer workouts, all of it now is you're getting to put it to the test now. So these last few days, this last couple of weeks, you want to keep active, you want to keep moving, maybe get outside a little bit more, get acclimated just to spending a couple hours, maybe 3 or 4 hours outside a day, because that's what you're going to be doing come fall camp. You want to get your feet in condition. These are the veteran tricks that you learn as you go. Like, you want to get your feet ready because the blisters are inevitable. You just got to be as prepared as you can. Your skin on your feet's got to be a little bit tougher than normal. Weird things like taking care of your feet and like manicure. I'm getting really in depth with feet here. That's weird, but like taking care of yourself with like making sure your toenails are cut appropriately at length and your fingernails as well. Those little things that you know are going to nag you at camp if you don't take care of them now. You try to take care of those. You want to get your last few moments with your friends and family and loved ones because you want to maximize the time that you go into the chamber. You want to limit the distraction. So if you go into it thinking, man, I wish I would have spent some more time with my family. Man, I would have hung out with my friends one more time. And I'm thinking about that, distracting yourself during camp. So all that, you want to get it out of your system in these last couple of weeks. Make sure, if you can, if you live close by, take that last trip home. I used to do that all the time, and take one more trip back to California on one of my free weekends just to get in with the family a little bit and spend time with them, so that I wouldn't be thinking about it come fall camp. Because once you go into the chamber, once you're locked in, there's no coming up for air. I mean, you're going into it not just for fall camp, but this is going into the season, right? Like you're going all the way till December and hopefully to late December if you're getting to postseason play without really engaging with your friends and family. Social media was an issue for me, but I would imagine that a lot of guys are probably shutting it down for the next few weeks just to make sure that they're locked in for camp. But it's always a fun time. It's an exciting time. I know for us back in the day, we used to go up to Ely to get out of the heat, to beat the heat a little bit. Those first 2 days to check in and helmets only practices were in Vegas, but we would get up out of the heat as quickly as possible. So that was fun to get sort of get your bags packed and get ready to go. But staying in Vegas has its benefits too. But that heat is something different. I tell you, we've been experiencing that heat wave that kind of pulled out in 112, 118 the last couple of weeks. It won't be that hot, hopefully, during fall camp. Fingers crossed, because we'll be out there cooking. But it'll be a fun time. It's going to be fun to introduce themselves to all the new players and really get acclimated and hit the ground running here in fall camp.
So we've been talking to a lot of the coaches, and most of the coaches are new. It's a new staff, a new head coach in Barry Odom. Akeem Davis is a really interesting guy because he's really not that far from a playing career in the NFL and a little bit in the CFL, in the National Football League, and he's a cornerbacks coach for UNLV. He had time with the Redskins, the Saints, the Bucks, the Seahawks, the Colts, the Chiefs, and the Jaguars. Interesting choice. Another guy, you have a staff here where you've got some real veterans like James Shebest and Vance Weiss. And then you've got a lot of young guys. You've got guys who are sort of, breaking a barrier at the coordinator positions at, 30 and 29 years old. And Akeem Davis is in that range. Did you get to see him at all at spring practice? Really active. And one of the coaches who was just constantly running around the field, clapping, getting in guys' faces positive, and also getting on them hard. He's got a ton of upside. And I don't mean to insult anyone by judging them as coaches, but he's an energetic dude. And obviously, I would assume as a college athlete, you talk to a guy who got time in the NFL, that means something.
Yeah, it's a unique perspective, I think, when you have a recent player. I think a lot of coaches, most coaches, I would assume, not head coaches, but like position coaches, have former playing experience, and maybe some of them, reach the highest level of playing in the NFL, like Coach Davis did. But it's unique to have that experience be so recent. And I say that because a lot of former players are coaches, but the times have changed so much that the playing experience doesn't resonate with the players you're coaching, if that makes sense. Like that, if it's not recent enough, you kind of lose that former player attribute and that skill set or that ability to relate, because the players don't relate to your time. And I would look to the example, just for a popular name, Herm Edwards, when he took over at Arizona State, he was no longer, I would say, in the eyes of the players he was coaching and recruiting, he was no longer former player Herm Edwards. He was former TV personality Herm Edwards, maybe, but the player aspect of who he was maybe lost a little bit, and the impact of that on players that he was currently coaching wasn't as good. So Coach Davis's more recent NFL playing experience makes the game, or his ability to use that translation from coach to player, it's more effective because it's recent and the players can resonate. He maybe even look up his highlights and see what he played or the systems he played in, have other names that they're familiar with that he played with because they grew up watching those players too. So I think the player coaching aspect, there's a window where you have to be recent enough to where it resonates with the players, but also experienced enough as a coach to where you've gotten some, the rookie coaching stuff out of your belt. You've learned some things as a coach, how to be a coach. And I think Coach Davis is right in that window where he's still fun enough, if I could put it that way, to relate to the players on a player level, on a former player level. It's recent to him. But then at the same time, he's got coaching experience to say, because I'm a player and because I'm a coach, I've learned so far to do this differently. And then I could give you the coaching side after I've caught your ear as a player, as a former player. Now I can actually give you some good, valuable information. I think he's right in that zone where the former player and the future great coach is sort of budding in him. So he's maximizing that time with UNLV.
We had a chance to talk to Akeem Davis this week on ESPN Las Vegas and started off the conversation, or at least this part of the conversation. We talked about his opportunity in the offseason actually to be part of something with the NFL, the Diversity Fellowship for coaches. And we asked him how it came together and what it was all about.
Oh, it was awesome. And so I got an opportunity to go out to Green Bay and do the Bill Walsh Minority Fellowship, and pretty much go fly on the wall in all the meetings. They give you a few projects that they expect you to work with the guys one-on-one, the players one-on-one as well. And, you get a chance to give your input when asked. And so it was a great opportunity. It was a great opportunity. Got a chance to, just kind of see how things are ran from that level. Just the organization and the fluidity of meetings and practice and meetings after practice, and how the pros come in and do it from a coach's standpoint and not from a player standpoint. The goal for me was to make sure I came and went there and took some tools, that my guys and our coaching staff can utilize here at UNLV. And so that, if you want to be at that level, you want to coach at that level, you want to play at that level, you got to do things like they do it at that level. And so took a handful of things back and brought it back here to Vegas. And some of those things we'll utilize throughout the season. But overall experience, it was great, man. It was awesome, and really glad I did it.
Those kind of experiences are invaluable. And it kind of alludes to what I was talking about, where the former player in him is now learning how to be a coach. And you can get so much from going around other coaches, especially at the NFL level, where these guys are, the peak of coaching when you're talking about the game of football. So getting to be a fly on the wall in those conversations and learning from some of the best coaches in the land when you're talking about football is invaluable. And it transforms him from a player into a coach. And those kinds of things, just bringing that information back, but then personally what you've developed as a coach and those little tidbits that maybe are more personable from those guys and being in that environment really come in handy when you're going back and trying to impart a message to younger players. Also with the skill set that you already have, the credibility that you've already established with being a former player, those kinds of things only enhance your ability to coach at a high level. And anytime, one of these things is, it's almost like I think about how Doug went to the Manning camp, right? So just the fact that he did that, coming back, the guys look at him with a little bit more respect, like, hey, our guy went to the Manning camp, da-da-da-da. He's this, that, and the other. All the things that come with attending that make his image better to the players around him. The same can happen with a coach. If the coach goes and is at this coaching clinic or whatever you want to call it with NFL coaches, and he comes back, even without sharing any information, the respect that the players have for him enhances by that much, just because he was there, just because he was in the presence of those guys. Not every coach gets to go to those things. Not every staff has a coach that has the ability to go and be a part of things like that. So The fact that he was able to do that and bring it back to UNLV and bring that information back, it's one thing to have it on your resume that I was here, that I played here, that I did this thing there, but it's another thing to have, this offseason, this immediate time while I'm a UNLV coach, I was able to do that for the purpose of making UNLV better by making myself better. So that's a great opportunity, and great things come from those kind of fellowships, I guess I'll call them, of coaches or players. Anytime people are around each other, you're going to come away better, and hopefully he came away a better coach after that.
Here's more from Akeem Davis, cornerbacks coach with UNLV, as we're talking about the cornerbacks training camp. Football camp opens up here in just a couple days for UNLV football, as he discusses his relationship with Barry Odom and how this all came together for him to take the gig in Vegas.
Like, I played for Coach Odom. He was my DC at the University of Memphis. And Coach Odom actually gave me my first job. Whenever I was done playing ball with the Seattle Seahawks, and I went and did a 3-day mini camp, got cut, came back to Memphis. I wanted to be a ball coach, and I went in the office. He was sitting down, and I said, "Hey, Coach, I want to coach ball." And he said, "Well, look, I'm going to put you to work." And he gave me my first job as a graduate assistant. And it, kind of left him after 2 weeks when the Calgary Stampeders came calling. And, I had that conversation with him, and he said, "Look, man, if you still want to play, go play. Like, you can always come back and be a football coach, but go play." And I've leaned on Coach Odom heavily throughout my years as a young coach when I needed advice, when making the next career move, or when game planning, and then obviously when the transfer portal hit, just making sure that if he had a player from his school that was getting in the portal, I would always reach out to him and call him and say, "Hey, Coach, what about that guy?" But I hadn't seen him. My first time actually seeing him, putting my eyes on him for the first time, was when I got off the plane and came to the building and saw him. And that was almost 11 years after I had, played for him. And so it's amazing how you can kind of keep in contact and feel like you hadn't missed a beat. But like you say, like we alluded earlier about the NFL, man, when you look back and you see how much time then got away from you, you realize that it's been a while. And so we all got football daddies in this profession, and this is a profession, that's exactly what it is. But I look up to Coach Odom more than a head coach. He's been like a football daddy to me. And, loyalty, family, his wife, Miss Tia, his sons, JT Garrett, his daughter, Anna Lockwood, they blood won't make us any closer. And, I know what it's like to be in a foxhole with a guy like him, man, and I come to work excited every day because the vision and that he has for this program, I know it works because I played for him, and now I'm getting the opportunity to work for him. And those principles hadn't changed. He's, been successful everywhere he's been, and I'm looking forward to him, continuing that success here at UNLV, and I'm just excited to be a part of it.
The first thing that pops to me is the Southern twang. I'm gonna love this season because you want to play ball like that to me is like you live, breathe football. When you say instead of you want to play football, you want to play ball, like that, just the way it rolls off, it's just like this is a different breed. I'm not gonna say, because this is gonna feed into the narrative. The SEC and the Southern Conference they know football down there in the South, but I mean they do. So just to hear it like it, live and in action in Vegas, it's new, it's different. You get no nonsense when we talk about that. And then with that comes some common themes. And I've been a fan of Coach Odom in this regard just since the moment he touched down, the family aspect. And I've heard it from multiple coaches on staff who've reflected on Coach Odom. I've heard it from him himself and how important family is to him. And little things like his kids at the press conference, and not just there as props, but they were there and engaged, and they're engaged in football. Both of his sons, his kids play, his daughter, they're very involved and understand what it means to be football oriented, and they're a football family. So that extends to the coaching staff where it's the football family. And Coach Davis is no exception to that. And he used the term football daddy. And I can relate to that term because you're being raised in essence by people that coached you. There's times in my life where I spent more times with my coaches than I did with my parents at home. I was in a situation where a lot of my playing career, my athletic career, my dad was involved in high school and things like that. But I'm with the coach, especially at a college level. You're with your coach more than you're with anybody else. And to have that relationship, there's several coaches on staff, at least a couple that have that relationship of father figure with Coach Odom. So not only does that help you in terms of the communication and the trust and things that go into the meeting rooms and stuff like that for the staff, but it helps you to be able to be your most authentic self with the players. And it helps the players to see and have the image. And this goes beyond football. It has the image of family presented to them in multiple ways throughout their life. And that message resonates with young men, especially. And I think it's an important aspect to have that family aspect, to have that visible and at the forefront with guys, because you're able to reach them at a deeper level than just the transactional relationship where it's football or nothing. So when I'm telling you to do something, you know it's coming from a position of love, from a position of trying to see the best you and giving you the best information. That makes it easier to ask a guy to do something or to sacrifice his body or to come and wake up at 6 a.m. to be a part of this workout, because you know that's a hard thing to ask for people. But if that person looks at you as a football daddy, it's easier. It's easier to make that request of guys. And football has a lot of those tough asks where you're being asked to do things that are tough. And having somebody that you care about or somebody that cares about you, that you know cares about you, asked to do those things is important. It's invaluable. But the experience and the I guess the relationship that's built with Coach Odom and with his coaching staff, Coach Davis in particular, being a former player of his, that relationship is one that transcends. It just makes everything easier. You get the sense now because of that the mindset is consistent throughout the program, and that's, I've talked about that before. Having a consistent message, not just verbally, but the intimate details of it, the ins and outs, the intangible details of a relationship on a coaching staff are so important, and you build that over time. I think we all have friends in our life that we maybe haven't seen in a long time that we grew up with, but when we see them again, we pick back up like nothing ever, like we didn't miss a beat. And I think that's what Coach Odom has with Coach Davis. It's a guy that, went his own way. And because you gave your blessing to him to go his own way, the relationship wasn't fractured when he left. You know, that he talked about going back to play for the NFL and having to have that conversation with Coach Odom. It could have gone a very different way. Like Coach Odom could have held a grudge against him and be like, I don't want you to go, whatever the case. You got to quit, do it, whatever. However that relationship could end it. But the fact that he recalls Coach Odom being graceful in that departure and say, hey, go play ball. It'll be here when you come back. Go do that. And then now coming full circle, now he's back in the fold as a coach, and he's gone and played and learned some things. But now coming back with Coach Odom, that relationship hasn't fractured. They can pick up where they left off. And, of course, some of the nuances of being a former player, he understands the system and what Coach Odom expects of the players. So now he can go to that position group. When Coach Odom's here at the top saying, I need you to do this, I need you to do this, now he can go to that big position group and say, hey, he was telling me that, umpteen years ago. And I understand how it feels to be you, but look at where I got because I listened to him. I played in the NFL, and if that's your goal, you can do that too. That message, it hits a little bit different when you have a former player or that relationship with the head coach and assistant coach.
We're talking about Akeem Davis, cornerback room. Let's delve into the room itself, which with defensive backs, and this whole group is coached by Akeem Davis and Damon Magazoo, who's a holdover from last year's staff. That's a massive, massive number. Yet at cornerback, they really got to sort things out. And during the interview with Akeem Davis, I mentioned, hey, there's some honors, preseason honors for Ricky Johnson, for Cam Oliver. And without kind of blurting it out, I think those guys have to fight for their jobs to get them initially on the one line. And they're going to have to fight like hell and play really well during the season because there's a lot of fresh faces. And keep in mind, they are replacing their best cover corner in Noah Williams, who went to the Pac-12 or whatever it is now, the Pac-9. He's at Cal. So listen to Davis just talk about the starting gigs there and the amount of competition with all these bodies.
Well, competition is the central theme of our program. When you have great competition at that position, it forces everybody to be consistent and dialed in each and every single day. Because I know in our room, all of those guys know that I got to come and I got to come play and bring my A game each and every single day, because I tell them it's like the NFL. Like every Tuesday in the NFL, somebody get cut. And if you ain't bringing it every single day, then don't be that guy. Coach Davis was once that guy. You know what I'm saying? And I can give it to him because I was signed by 7 teams and cut by 7 teams. And so hopefully, we work together, though. It's a brotherhood. We have a relational, it's not a transactional relationship with our guys. It's a relationship-based, group that we dealing with. And, they come to work each and every single day. And that depth, man, we got some quality depth. And I tell them, I said, when we all doing our job, it's going to be enough to go around for everybody. When we all playing at a championship level, it's going to be enough to go around for everybody, because each and every one of us are going to have a role, whether that be in the kicking game, whether that be on defense, whatever phase that is, whatever your role is, you will have an important role. So embrace that role, take advantage of it, and make sure you play that role with a hard, sharp edge, and that give our football team an edge as well.
I think everybody at this point, if you're a fan of football, you know the story of Terrell Davis, right? And how he made a name for himself on special teams and some of the big hits he made. And then from that, earned roster spots and was able to make an impact on the coaching staff. But because he took pride in special teams, he was able to make the roster and didn't have, obviously, the Hall of Fame career at running back. But it started on special teams, his effort, and that is what caught the coach's staff's eyes. We know how important special teams is based on what we saw in spring ball to this coaching staff. The first 20 minutes, a lot of coaches don't do this. A lot of teams don't do this. But the first 20, 30 minutes of practice is dedicated to special teams. And it's not like a break. It's not like rest time. It's not lollygag time. It's like high intensity 20 minutes of practice. And they're sharp with the drills. They have position specific drills going on. It's like a circuit drill with special teams. And you don't see that at most programs. UNLV is unique right now in that regard because you see how special or how important special teams is. You understand that that's an opportunity for you if you're in a group like the DBs where it's deep and there's a lot of competition at that spot. Maybe you're not getting as many reps as you wanted during team practice or the team portion of practice or during 7-on-7. Maybe you're not catching interceptions or making pass deflections or pass breakups during the team drills. But if you can show effort and intensity during special teams, you'll get noticed. Not only will you get on the field on Saturdays, but because you get noticed, maybe you get opportunities in the rotation as a role player on the defensive side of the ball as well. We can say with certainty that they want to be fast on special teams based on what we saw this spring. They want to be fast, they want to be explosive, and they want to trust the guys that they have out there. So having a big secondary plays two roles. One creates depth for that unit because come the fourth quarter in this day and age, with the amount of times that teams are throwing the football, you're going to need more than just a 1-2 rotation just to survive the season. That's number one. But number two, you're also going to trust your special teams unit a lot more if you've built up the skill and have a deeper roster because you're not afraid to put your 3s and 4s out there in special teams and as guys you trust to run down there on coverages and make tackles. So there's that to it. But the DB room is going to have competition. I see it, and I've been on teams where this was the case where, we're not all starting. But when it's my turn on the field, there's like little competitions. Like, hey, I'm on the field. I'm going to make the tackle this play. And then when I come off, I'm going to tell you about it. Like, yeah, you see me make that tackle. Now it's your turn. You go out and do that. And kind of rejoicing in each other's success when you have a deep roster like this. Because when you have this kind of depth, you don't intend to have one guy play every snap. And I think we saw that a little bit with the aforementioned Noah Williams, who was, I would say, the best one-on-one man-to-man coverage guy that UNLV had on the roster as far as the cornerbacks go. So hate to see him leave, but the fact is he was out there just about every play. And then he was also in the return game as well. He was catching punts, if you remember, and returning kickoffs at the same time. So you don't necessarily want that from your top guys. You don't want him to always have to carry the load on defense and special teams because he's the only guy you trust. You want to have 5-6 guys that you want to say, I would make you a starter if I could. And I'll give you reps during the game. Maybe not the number 1 reps, but you're going to get reps. You're going to have 5 or 6 guys that you feel that way about, at least, especially when we're talking about cover corners here in a 3-3-5 defense. If you're going to have that many DBs on the field, you need to have a solid rotation. But then also to rotate the guys that maybe are the back end of that into special teams and to have them really taking pride in being special teams guys. Not just being out there because, I'm not good enough to play on the 1s and 2s and I'm kind of moping out here. I don't really care. Meh, woe is me. But you want them to be fired up about the opportunity to prove themselves on special teams because they know you take special teams serious. They know Coach Odom's watching special teams and he's assessing people with a fine comb based on their effort on special teams. That could be their end. And because of that, they have more intensity. And then the team is elevated all around because of that.
So the room itself, and I'm not about to guess who's 1s, 2s, and 3s because I think we got to see it. I'm also not exactly sure which players of the 23 defensive backs. I mean, I know a good amount of them are safeties, but I think there's going to be folks who are hybrid where they can maybe play on the edge, but also play safety. So coming out of the gates, Ricky Johnson and Cam Oliver have the most experience. BJ Harris, finally healthy, showed out pretty well. And remember, he had to, I think one of his first games was against Notre Dame, and he was going against massive receivers, smaller guy, but really fast, good cover guy. Some of the other veterans back are Walden, a local walk-on who's really good on special teams, Rashad Tanner. And then this group, and we're going to see who's going to win time. What I was told from some was that Quentin Moten, one of the JUCOs who's in, is absolutely a guy who's going to challenge Oliver and Johnson for a spot at cornerback and get some time. Jet Elad's a bigger guy who's got experience at JUCO and also Ohio. Isaiah Hackett is a JUCO. Jalen Frazier is a smaller guy, but he's in from NC State. Jonathan Baldwin's brother actually walked on, Jalen Baldwin, who had some good offers. He's a little smaller than Jonathan. And then we'll see about Thomas Anderson, who's more around 6'1", 6'2". And then there's a ton of safeties, and we can mention guys like Jure Williams. Jure's been a nickelback over the course of his career. But what do you need to see in the spring to gain trust in guys when they're going to have to be on that island? Obviously, there's some equity there with Cam Oliver and Ricky Johnson.
What I need to see from the corners, and just based on what I have a feel for what this defense wants to be, I want to see guys who have good skills when the ball's in the air. And that's something that's underrated quality. It's not just about being able to catch. Or that should be a given, because they want to be opportunistic on defense. So guys got to be able to come down with the ball. That's a given. But I think there's a certain aspect of orientation when you look back to find the ball. And if you played, you know this, you know what I'm talking about. As a defender, it's even harder than as a wide receiver. But once you look back for the ball, you look at it from an offensive standpoint. Do you break stride? Do you drift off your path because you're looking back and trying to find the ball? Or are you very good and adept at turning around and locating the ball in the air without losing coordination in your stride? And that's something that a lot of young DBs struggle with. And we saw that with UNLV in the past with the DBs, not being able to acclimate to the ball when it's in the air, like being in position to make a play, but because they're trying to locate the ball, they end up missing out on a play. And then the receiver catches the ball over their head or whatever the catch may be for a big play. So that's number one. I want to see guys that are ball hawks in the sense that they are able to locate the ball and get to it as quickly as possible, whether it's in the air or on the ground. And that play recognition, I think, is going to be mandatory for the guys. We heard Coach Odom this week and during the media day talk about what he expects the DBs to be. The corners, even with the safeties and the linebackers, have to be run fit players at times. So you're going to have to identify plays quickly. So I guess what I'm trying to say is the football IQ has to be there. And this may go across the board, but especially from corners, because you are out there on an island. You're away from space. Your key goes from receiver running a route to now finding the run fit in an instant. And you have to be able to do that. Have that ball hawk mentality where maybe you can anticipate a play before it even happens and unfolds. So those are some of the things. I want to see strength. I want to see guys who are able to come up and play press coverage and the guy struggles to get off the line of scrimmage. I mean, it's one thing to go line up in press coverage. But if you line up in press coverage and the guy is going right by you and you're not disrupting the timing of the flow or anything like that, then it doesn't matter. You might as well play off 10 yards. I want to see guys in coverage, especially at corner, with the ability and the attitude that says, I'm going to come up and I'm going to keep you from getting off the line of scrimmage as long as possible. And I'm going to disrupt the whole flow of the offense. Guys with the attitude of a BJ Harris. You talked about at Notre Dame, his first time really getting out on the field against a lot of bigger receivers, but the attitude and the mindset, you wouldn't have known he was the smallest guy on the field. He was out there going after tackles, being aggressive, pressing up in coverage when he was called on to do. That mindset from everybody in the secondary is going to be necessary. And I'm excited to see what some of these new players add. You mentioned some of them. Jet Elad, the size automatically pops. Anytime you got a JUCO transfer or a fifth-year senior, anybody transferring, Jalen Frazier from NC State, those guys who have playing experience at a high level, at the collegiate level, you look to see what they're going to bring to UNLV. And especially with the size that I mentioned with Jet Elad, Quentin I'm not going to mess up his name, Moten. Those guys, they're bringing their strength and that aggressive mindset because they know what it takes to play at this level. So how quickly they can pick up the playbook, how quickly they can bring that mindset and be those ball hawks on the secondary. I think it's no secret at this point that they want to be opportunistic on defense. And we saw that in the spring game a little bit, the way they blitzed, the pressures that they were able to bring in that time and the infancy of the defense. Imagine that times 10 come spring or come fall. They're going to want to dial up the pressures. They're going to want to confuse quarterbacks, get them throwing from pressure, and then on the back end in the secondary, be able to come down with some of those and create turnovers on the back end. So that's their MO. And the DBs obviously have, I think, the biggest role when it comes to creating turnovers and explosive plays, whether it's on blitzes or just making interceptions down the field. Those big momentum swinging plays usually come from the secondary. So that's what I expect to see.
So practice begins this week. We'll have access in the media for at least 2 or 3 of them over the next 10 days. So I'll do my best to at least tweet out some updates on. I'm not going to official. I don't have anything official on the 1s and 2s and 3s, but I'll give you an idea who's out there kind of working with the different units. And I'm curious to see, because I don't know. I assume Ricky Johnson and Cam Oliver are going to get the first chances at cornerback, but there's so many bodies on the field that obviously there's an intense battle for the starting jobs, and then the 2s and the 3s. UNLV football had a productive week on the commit front for 2024 from the defensive back standpoint. No surprise, they're going to be bringing in more defensive backs, right? Cornerback Eason out of Gilbert, Arizona. He was a pretty big get, pretty good list of schools that UNLV beat out in Arizona, CSU, Louisville, Reno, San Diego State. And then they got a safety from Bakersfield, Trey Fulton, who's long, lean, thin guy at 6'2", 6'3", and he had offers from San Jose State, Utah State, and Boise. So, it's important to beat out teams around the conference. So that's a good thing. Let's close with this, Caleb. So we've got week 0. There's 3 games involving Mountain West Conference teams. Week 0 is just 29 days away. So we're talking on the 26th of August. And we mentioned these teams are practicing already from the Mountain West. San Jose State's getting a ton of points as they're on the road against USC. Can they be competitive? They have a chance. I'm sure you're going to back me up on this. Elite quarterbacks can make such a difference in terms of closing a talent gap across a roster. And Chevin Cordero is a really dangerous guy. And if USC is looking ahead, not ready to go, a lot of times these early games for the big boys, as they're looking ahead to bigger games, can, provide a snafu. San Diego State's in a really intense game with Ohio. We talked to one of our pro gambling insiders on ESPN Las Vegas this week, Brad Powers, and he said, listen, Ohio and San Diego State, you could easily flip them in terms of who's the favorite. San Diego State's a slight favorite at 3, but this would be a great bowl game. And then Hawaii's in a really interesting spot. The number's small, considering what happened last year. Vanderbilt just put it on Hawaii in Hawaii, and it was one of those late chase games. And I remember chasing. I'm like, of course Hawaii's going to come back. And it was just like Vandy score, Vandy score, Vandy score, Vandy score. Hawaii got better as the season went along, and they refused to stop fighting. And we saw it against UNLV much later in the season. They fought their ass off and physically, I thought, whooped up on UNLV. And let's be honest, Caleb, it was one of the reasons I think the show there, if Eric Harper was kind of teetering on Marcus Arroyo, that game was a massive disappointment. But point is, on Hawaii, I'm going to call it a revenge spot, but I'm calling it a revenge spot because they got whipped so badly by Vandy and got embarrassed. So I'm sure they're going to be fired up for that one. So these guys, they're in camp. Hawaii will bounce back the next week. They host Stanford. They're getting 9 in that one. But, it's here, man. It's here. We're starting to break down games. This is freaking awesome. And, again, week 0 inside of 30 days away.
It's fun. I just to finally see games in the schedule being around the corner. It's super exciting. I love week 0 games. From a player standpoint, it was fun to get to see all the other teams go at it first. Maybe get a preview, I guess, of what to expect, because every fall or every offseason, there's tweaks and adjustments. And especially these days with the transfer portal, Hawaii may be a completely different team than what they were at the end of last year when they spoiled UNLV's hopes at a bowl game. So that team's going to be fun to, and also looking at teams that are playing common opponents. So Hawaii and Vandy, those are 2 teams that UNLV has on the schedule. So it's going to be cool to see how they match up together schematically and the things that they put on film, because you can get some hints, right? You can get a little bit of a head start on your game prep. I know the coaches will, for sure. You can start to accumulate some tendencies for this season, the most current season, to put film out on. So watching those games is going to be huge. USC and San Jose State playing together. You mentioned a quarterback being able to change the whole feel of a game in an instant. It has potential to be an upset. That 30 is a huge number. I don't know if that's disrespectful to San Jose State or if it's just how good USC is projected to be this year. But either way, it has potential to be a game where San Jose State makes a mark, and the Mountain West in turn makes a mark on the national narrative with football. So going to be fun to watch that. But we're going to have all these games at our disposal because they're week 0. We won't be caught up doing our own game as we're on the broadcast every week for UNLV, because UNLV doesn't have that game. And that's why probably I would assume why they're not starting camp early, because they don't have that week 0 game. But it's going to be fun to sit back and watch this slate of games. The feel of college football being in the air, and the NFL also right around the corner with preseason kicking off right around the same time. It's just a good time for football fans, and we've been itching for it for months. And now to see it there and to get excited for this year's rendition of each team, it's going to be a fun time. I'm really excited to see, because I think Hawaii, how they finished the season, not just because they beat UNLV, but the way they played. I think if they carried any of that energy into the offseason, springboard, if you will, into the offseason and improved, I think they're going to surprise people in the Mountain West. They have the potential to do that based on the way they finished. I don't know that Vandy's going to run away the way they did. I know anytime Hawaii comes to the mainland, it's tough, especially going all the way across the country to Tennessee. That's a tough one to go do. But I'm excited to see what they do in week 0 and how different that team looks compared to the team that was for most of 2022. I think the team that beat UNLV was much better than the team that lost to Vandy in week 0 last year. So now with the offseason under their belt and that kind of ethic, that work ethic and mentality of an offseason, they could be a surprising team in the Mountain West. We'll see.
Yeah, if you want to get a little preview of some of the other teams around the Mountain West Conference, we're putting a ton of content up. So up on my YouTube page, which we tweet out all the time, at Steve Cofield at ESPN Las Vegas, at UNLV All Access. There's a bunch of interviews with some of the Mountain West Conference coaches, including Timmy Chang. And I mentioned one of my favorite prospects because I always tell the story about one of my favorite linemen I've ever seen up close was that game at Arkansas State, and it was pouring. UNLV's on the road, and really this guy sort of affected UNLV's season the rest of the way. Forrest Merrill, right, was a kid who was 5'11" and 350, and I see you smiling because he wrecked everything UNLV tried to do in the middle of the line, and I think he was the one who actually got he was chasing the hell out of Armani, and that was the game he got hurt in, but he just stopped everything at 5'11", 350, and has had some time in the NFL, and he was a small school guy, Arkansas State and Northeast Oklahoma A&M. Similar path has been taken by a guy named Sauce Williams, who is listed at 5'11", 339, which I love the big uglies, but especially when they're squatty. That kid's going to be cool to watch. So that'll be fun. And, Hawaii plays hard. And it's also part of the narrative for the season. I don't know if you saw, but, Adam Hill was all about outing the one person who voted UNLV for the UNLV community. And he stated his case. And, again, I'm not going to pick UNLV for first, but they were in a lot of close games last year. They may have a coaching upgrade. Last year, they won 5 games without a fully healthy Doug Brumfield the entire season. But the story around the Mountain West Conference is the bottom of the conference is coming up, which is going to make it harder for the traditional powers to just freaking roll through the season. Reno is going to be better. They just are. They've brought in some impact running backs. They've given their Colorado transfer quarterback, Brendan Lewis, he's got the job. I talked to Ken Wilson at Media Days, and I thought he was going to hem and haw a little bit. Like, it's still a battle. He's like, he's got the job. Here's what he can do. We're excited about this. Like I said, they brought in high-impact running backs. They're going to be better. Hawaii's going to be better. The teams at the bottom, and we'll say, traditionally UNLV has been at the bottom. The teams at the bottom are on the come. We're in a rebuilding phase now. This is year 2 or 3 of the rebuild.
And that's kind of what you hope for. And that's what the transfer portal could mean. The way that these teams are able to remake their rosters basically overnight. Coaching staff changes, things like that re-energize programs. I think you hope to catch some success in terms of jockeying for position amongst the top teams. You want conferences to be more competitive. You want this sort of pliable dynamic to your conference, where a team could elevate themselves from the bottom to the top, where it's not always Boise, San Diego State competing for the conference title, or Fresno State, even throw them in the mix, because that's what it's been for the Mountain West for the past decade or so. It's been the same few teams always at the top. Well, that's good. It's good to have some consistency, but at the end of the day, you want to see some parity. You want to see guys, the little guys, so to speak, have a chance And I think that's what has the ability to happen when you see mass exodus like you saw from Reno, because Reno was one of the top teams before their coach got poached, I guess, if you want to call it. And then the transfers that left the program there, it changed the makeup of a team. And now, like you mentioned, they're coming back with the additions that they made, also utilizing the transfer portal and things like that. UNLV has the opportunity to do that. There's 40 plus guys that are going to be new to the roster this year, key positional guys that are going to be new to the roster. You mentioned another thing that I'm excited to see. This is the first time in a long time, in a very long time, that I can remember. This is going back to my playing days, that UNLV entered the season with a sure starting quarterback. Like, we know this guy is going to be our guy. He's had an entire offseason to be the guy. And Doug is, I think, the right guy to do that. I mentioned even last year, the last couple of years, that it would be ideal for Doug to have the keys to the program and understand that and have a full offseason under his belt. I think that has huge benefits to a team and to a player and his individual confidence and development. So I think UNLV, for that reason, I'm excited to see what could happen. I'm not, and I've said this on my social media, and I've said it to you on your show on Cofield and Company. Any predictions as in terms of who's going to finish where, who's going to be number one, how many wins or losses any team's going to have, especially talking about UNLV, is basically guesswork. We don't know. We have to see it. And not just see it in fall practice. We have to see it up against each other. Like, we have to see what it looks like on Saturdays before we can make any sort of judgments about where each team will finish. But the fact that it's wide open, or at least more open than it's ever been, in my estimation, with the conference, is exciting. It means week in, week out, you're going to have exciting football games and entertaining, valuable football games to watch that means something in the grand scheme of things. UNLV was a part of a lot of those games last year already, and unfortunately lost more than they won. But the fact that those games were so fun and entertaining. I go back to San Diego State. That game was phenomenal. I mean, just being a part of that football game, UNLV having a chance to win it, the way that game shook down at the end, it was exciting to be a part of. Now there's going to be more of that week in and week out. Fresno State, even UNLV going back and forth with those juggernauts in the conference. Last year, we think it's an improved roster. We think there might be some adjustments in the coaching staff and in the philosophy that make this team, if nothing else, different. I'm sure the defense is going to be better than it's ever been under Coach Odom, that at least more intently focused on. So we'll see if the product on Saturdays is better. But I'm excited to see the parity of this conference play out on Saturdays, starting August 26th. It's right around the corner, but we're going to get to see it. We're going to, you and I will be at our practice and get a preview it, maybe give a in-depth view on, or a sneak peek at least at the depth chart and what it's going to look like from that standpoint. But as in terms of what it's going to look like on Saturdays, how they're going to finish, we're not going to know till we see it on game day.
Caleb, good job. I'll see you out at practice this week.
All right, take it easy.